What we've learnt to do, Hugh and I, on this farm is we've actually learnt to work with our soils and our environment and the resources we have available. And I think we have probably quadrupled the production off this farm compared to what we had when we were just sort of doing what we were doing because the grandfather did it.
One of the things that has always been very special for Māori is our connection to land. We see ourselves as part of the land. We are the land is us. And when you have that as a core fundamental principle, then when you farm the land, it's always with elements of balance, of care, of respect. And so those values pretty much are our guiding principle. So those values have had a significant influence on the way we farm. We have lower stock units. We only milk once a day. We try to stay with the rhythm of the daylight hours for our animals. And so all of those things is really about being in sync. So that's some of the ways our values play out in the way we farm.
As a seed producer here in New Zealand, we quite often produce a large component of the world's seeds. So we produce more than half of the world's clover seed and radish seed, and the third largest producer of ryegrass seed in the world as well. And that's where I see one of our roles from an arable perspective for food security, is breeding these new seeds and new technologies and then distributing that around to other countries in the world who can produce it. So New Zealand's role is probably to develop the technology, breed it up here, and then to sell those seeds to the rest of the world.
The best example I can give of the innovative nature of New Zealand agriculture is what happened when subsidies were withdrawn in the mid-80s. And they were withdrawn in a sense overnight, without a lot of warning, and catastrophe was predicted. But it didn't happen. Yes, there was some short-term pain, but what they did, they adapted to the new norm. They realised that to stay in business, they had to become more efficient.
Farmers transferring knowledge to other farmers is probably the best way of increasing production around the world, and farmers transferring that knowledge to other farmers is very important because the farmers that are receiving that knowledge can adapt it to their own system or to their own country, and I think that's one of the most powerful ways of transferring some of that knowledge.
Back in the late 90s we were growing mainly spring crops, and the problem with that is we had a really wet winter, which we too tend to happen with variable climate or climate change. We have these extreme events and therefore get a really wet winter and we couldn't get our crops in because it was so wet. So what we've done, we've moved to growing more autumn crops so we can get them established before the winter. Then if we get all the heavy rain through the winter, it means the crop's all set up ready to go, we don't have to replant. So that's one of the things we've worked at on our farm, is to maximise the opportunity of moisture through the winter, and then we're not having to sow crops in the spring. And therefore we can potentially get away with without irrigation.
Extensive soil testing has given us the ability to tailor a nutrient package to each crop. So that starts with a grid sampling of each paddock prior to planting, but also means we're not over applying any particular nutrients, and also saves us a lot of cost as well. Over time we've reduced our nutrient applications significantly whilst increasing our yield productivity. For example, on the onion crops we're applying over 40% less nitrogen. We've increased our yields by over 25% in the same time period.
We've always been a reasonably low input system, but we continue to strive to be as low as possible because we know that the lower inputs into our system, the least cost there is to your growing. But it's key for us to maintain that productivity that we do now. So what we've been doing, we've been really focusing on the soil component, and because we've been increasing the quality of our soil and the structure and the texture of our soil, that has actually given back to us. So the better our soil is, the more it gives back to us. It's a win-win really. We can have less inputs in, but it also stores more of the inputs that we need.